is the terror, to rise, to fall, to feel, to desire, and then lose it all. This is the terror, to see.
All right, so welcome to a brand new series here on the Deep Dive called Bookstars.
Ooh, exciting.
It is exciting. In each deep dive, we'll be kind of exploring the work of just a literary giant. And for this inaugural deep dive, we are going to be plunging headfirst into the world of Stephen King.
Nice.
Yeah, so to help us kind of unearth all the secrets and everything, we've got excerpts from his Spanish Wikipedia bibliography.
Oh, wow.
And a research paper examining his literary brilliance, ready to dissect.
Awesome, I'm ready.
So are you ready to unearth the secrets behind King's chilling tales?
Absolutely, let's do it. What really strikes me when I first look at these sources is how King blends like the ordinary with the extraordinary. You know, he takes relatable characters, everyday people, and throws them into these absolutely terrifying situations. And he's got this brand of horror that just feels so familiar and otherworldly all at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's why his work resonates with so many people.
I agree.
Because you're right, it is relatable, and I think that is a huge part of it. And speaking of his work, our Wikipedia source details a career spanning decades. We're talking over 60 novels.
Wow.
Starting all the way back in 1974 with Carrie.
Oh, Carrie.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid starting point for anyone new to King, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Carrie is a great jumping off point. And, it's interesting to note that Carrie itself was actually adapted into a film.
Oh, right.
One of many successful adaptations throughout his career.
Yeah, so many. I didn't even realize how many until I looked at the source material today. It's like a ton.
It really is. This crossover into pop culture really highlights his impact.
Huge.
Yeah, beyond just the literary world.
Yeah, and speaking of impact, the research paper emphasizes how King's not just churning out stories, he is racking up awards.
Yeah, he's got quite the collection.
The Bram Stoker Award, the British Fantasy Award.
Impressive.
And those aren't just participation trophies, those signify real influence on the horror genre.
Exactly. And the research paper goes on to say that there are these recurring themes that kind of weave throughout his work.
Oh, interesting.
Like fear and good versus evil, and even the importance of community.
Yeah, it's true.
That these aren't just superficial scares, they tap into something much deeper.
Yeah, it's almost like that's why it's so relatable, because those themes are so universal.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So universally human. And I mean, that's probably why his stories resonate so strongly with readers across different cultures,
I think so too.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
The research paper also points out that amidst all the terror, King actually sprinkles in moments of humor.
Really?
Yeah. Have you ever noticed that?
I mean, now that you mention it, yeah.
It's very subtle.
Yeah.
It's like a little wink from the master of horror himself.
That's amazing. And what's fascinating about that is how it just adds another dimension to his work.
It does.
It's not just about relentless fear. It's about capturing that full spectrum of human experience.
Yeah.
Even in the darkest of circumstances,
Yeah, and I think that ties back to the characters.
Yeah, for sure.
Which the research paper also delves into a bit.
Oh, interesting.
King doesn't just write characters, he crafts these complex, flawed individuals.
Oh, I see.
Think about Jack Torrance from The Shining, spiraling into madness.
Yeah.
Or Carrie White from Carrie, going from victim to a vengeful force,
Yeah, what's striking about that is that he makes us empathize with these characters.
Yeah.
Even when they're making questionable choices, he doesn't shy away from their flaws or their darkness, and that's what makes them feel so real and so human.
Exactly, and I think that humanity is a huge part of his success.
I think you're right.
So I want to jump back to the Spanish Wikipedia source for a second, because there's something that really caught my eye.
Okay.
Some titles I haven't even heard of before.
Oh, really? Like what?
The Eyes of the Dragon. The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. Everything's Eventual.
Interesting.
These titles alone, I mean, they just spark curiosity, wouldn't you say?
They really do. What's intriguing about this list is that it highlights King's versatility. It's like he's not confined to just novels.
Yeah.
There are short stories, screenplays, and even a nonfiction book about gargoyles.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's like he has this insatiable need to explore all these different forms of storytelling.
Wow.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
So we've got a lot to dive into today.
We do. I'm excited. Yeah, it's like he just can't be contained by like a single genre.
Right.
But let's maybe shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and dive into some of his most iconic works.
Yeah, let's do it.
The ones that have truly cemented his place in like the Horror Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Let's start with The Shining.
Okay.
A book that takes the concept of cabin fever to like a whole new level.
Oh, The Shining. Just the name, like, sends chills down my spine.
I know, right?
That image of the blood pouring out of the elevator, those creepy twin girls.
Yeah, so creepy.
In the hallway, pure nightmare fuel. Have you ever felt physically affected by a book?
Oh, for sure.
Like, a creeping dread just settling in? That's The Shining for me.
It's a masterclass in psychological horror,
Yeah.
King traps this family in the Overlook Hotel, this isolated, almost like living entity,
Right.
and then just slowly ratchets up the tension.
It's so good.
He masterfully uses the setting to like mirror Jack Torrance's descent into madness.
Yeah.
His alcoholism and writer's block feeding into the hotel's malevolence.
And the Overlook itself is practically a character, right?
Totally.
It's this like labyrinthine, oppressive force that seems to warp reality around it.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes you wonder if the horror comes from like the ghosts or from the isolation and the character's own internal struggles.
That's the brilliance of it,
It is.
King plays with those ambiguities, blurring the lines between what's real and what's imagined.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't talk about The Shining without mentioning the iconic film adaptation.
Of course. Even people who haven't read the book know about Here's Johnny
Right.
and those creepy twins.
So creepy.
It's crazy how certain images from King's work just become part of our collective pop culture consciousness.
I know. It speaks to the power of his storytelling.
It really does.
He creates these vivid images and scenes that latch onto your brain and just refuse to let go.
They do. They stick with you.
But let's move on to another classic.
Okay.
It, a sprawling epic
Oh, yeah.
that tackles themes of childhood trauma, fear, and the power of friendship.
It is such an interesting beast.
It is.
It's a monster story on the surface, right?
Yeah.
With Pennywise the Dancing Clown as this terrifying embodiment of childhood fears.
Yeah.
But it also delves into like deeper themes like coming of age, the complexities of memory, and the lasting impact of trauma.
And the way King uses the Losers Club, this group of outcast kids,
Yes.
to confront their fears together. It just adds this layer of hope and resilience, They find strength in like their shared experiences.
Right.
And their bond as a community.
You're so right. It reminds us that even our deepest fears can be faced, especially when we face them together.
I love that.
Now, for something a little different.
Yeah.
Misery.
Oh, is there
This one takes a sharp turn away from the supernatural, focusing on the very real horror of obsession and captivity.
Oh, yeah. Misery is claustrophobic in a whole new way.
Yeah,
It's a slow burn, focusing on the twisted dynamic between Paul Sheldon, the successful author,
Right.
and Annie Wilkes, his #1 fan,
Right, his #1 fan.
who holds him captive.
Annie is terrifying.
She is.
In her like normalcy.
Right.
She's not a monster from another dimension.
Yeah.
She's a human being driven to extremes by obsession.
Right.
And that makes her all the more unsettling, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. King taps into a fear we all have,
Yes.
The fear of losing control,
Losing control.
being at someone else's mercy. And the way he portrays the psychological torment that Paul endures,
Ugh, it's so good.
it's arguably more frightening than any physical violence.
It's true. It really is. It makes you think about the nature of fandom,
It does.
about the blurred lines between admiration and obsession.
Yeah.
And to think King himself has dealt with his fair share of obsessive fans, it adds this chilling layer of reality to the story.
I know. It really makes you wonder how much of his own experiences seeped into Misery, blurring the lines between fiction and reality.
Right.
Which brings us to an important point.
Okay.
While we are celebrating all of King's accomplishments,
Right.
it's also crucial to address some of the criticisms that have been levied against his work,
Yeah.
particularly concerning like the portrayal of women.
Right. We can't just gloss over that.
We can't.
While King is a master storyteller, some argue that his female characters often fall into stereotypes or are primarily victims, lacking the depth and agency of their male counterparts.
That's a valid critique.
It is.
And it prompts us to ask, like, how do we reconcile these flaws with the undeniable brilliance of his writing?
That's true.
Can we still appreciate his work while acknowledging its shortcomings?
It's a tough question.
It is.
And I think it's one that each reader kind of has to grapple with individually.
Yeah.
You know, we can certainly analyze how King's portrayal of women has evolved over time.
For sure.
And consider the context in which his earlier works were written.
Right. And it's also worth noting that King himself has addressed these criticisms,
He has.
acknowledging his growth as a writer and his increased awareness of these issues.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's up to the reader to decide how they want to engage with these complexities.
Right. And I think it's a testament to the power of King's work.
Yeah.
That you can spark these critical discussions. You know,
I agree.
It's not just entertainment.
Right.
It challenges us to think critically about representation.
Yes.
About the evolution of storytelling, and about the responsibility that comes with wielding such influence.
It really does.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of deep dives like this.
It is.
You know, we're not just summarizing the source material.
Yeah.
We're engaging with it
We're analyzing it.
and hopefully prompting you to do the same.
Exactly. So far, we've explored King's iconic novels, analyzed his recurring themes, and even delved into the criticism surrounding his work. But there's still so much more to uncover. Okay, so we've talked about like the big names, you know.
Right, the staples.
Yeah, the staples of any Stephen King fan's bookshelf.
Right.
But what about those hidden gems?
Ooh.
You know, the ones that might have slipped under the radar?
Right.
Our Spanish Wikipedia source actually reveals a side of King that might surprise even the most dedicated constant readers.
Oh, really? Oh,
So
yeah.
it says here
Yeah.
that he wrote a book called The Eyes of the Dragon.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
You've heard of that one?
Yeah, it's a fantasy novel.
Oh, I'm fancy.
Oh, right.
I'm thinking writing like dragons and magic.
Yeah.
That's not the image that usually comes to mind.
It's not. It challenges our preconceived notions of who King is as a writer.
That's so wild.
It's wild. And then there's The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon.
Okay.
This story about a young girl who is lost in the woods and her only solace is her Walkman and her devotion to this baseball player.
Okay, now that sounds more like classic King, you know?
Yeah, it does, right?
The isolation, the suspense, a character facing their fears.
Right.
But it's interesting how he weaves those elements into a story that isn't explicitly horror.
Exactly. And we can't forget, everything's eventual.
Oh, yeah. Everything's eventual.
A collection of short stories that just showcases King's incredible range.
Oh, he's got range.
Oh, yeah. You'll find everything from, like, chilling horror
Okay.
to heartwarming tales, even a story about a writer facing writer's block.
Oh, wow. Very meta.
Very meta. It's amazing how he can just effortlessly shift between genres. Like, he's got this whole toolbox
Yeah.
of storytelling techniques at his disposal.
Like, what do you think drives him to explore beyond the realm of horror?
I think it speaks to his constant need to challenge himself as a writer.
Yeah.
Like, he's not content to stay in one lane. He's constantly experimenting and pushing boundaries, you know?
It's true.
Finding new ways to connect with his readers.
You know what? He's like this literary chameleon,
I love that.
constantly adapting and evolving.
He is.
So it makes me wonder, like, what's next for Stephen King?
That's the exciting part.
What terrifying tales?
Right.
What surprising twists and turns does he still have up his sleeve?
Well, he's shown no signs of slowing down, and with a career spanning decades.
Yeah, he's been going for a while.
It's clear he's got a seemingly endless well of creativity, you know?
True. Who knows? Maybe we'll see him tackle historical fiction.
Right.
Or even science fiction.
Who knows? The possibilities are endless.
Endless. Whatever he writes, I have a feeling it'll be captivating
Oh, yeah.
and thought-provoking and maybe even a little bit terrifying.
Of course.
Like, he has this knack for getting under our skin.
He does.
You know, making us think about the world in a whole new light.
He's a master of his craft.
He is.
And his legacy goes far beyond jump scares and spooky clowns.
He really does.
He's a storyteller who taps into our deepest fears and desires and forces us to confront the darkness within ourselves and the world around us.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Stephen King.
Oh, man.
We've explored his iconic novels, his hidden gems, his recurring themes, and even some of the criticisms surrounding his work.
We did it.
But ultimately, we hope you've come away with a deeper appreciation for the man behind the macabre,
The man, the myth, the legend.
the storyteller who has captivated generations of readers.
Absolutely.
So if you haven't already, we encourage you to pick up a Stephen King book, turn off the lights, and get ready for a wild ride.
Do it.
You might just find yourself facing your own fears along the way.
You never know.
And join us next time for another fascinating deep dive into the world of Bookstars. Until then, happy reading.
Need to fight, but
tell brings a grow. Cigar